Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet, and as you know, in each episode, I discuss different topics about emerging technologies, AI, digital tech, and sometimes also I talk about business, startups, and entrepreneurship. And also, by now that I host sometimes thought leaders and experts in their field. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Robert Plotkin. Robert, he's an expert in the field of AI, but I'll tell you something really interesting about Robert. Like, he wrote a book called The Genie in the Machine. So maybe the first thing, Robert, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, this book, because I think it was the first book that talked about the impact of AI, right?
AI on innovation and patents specifically, which is a topic that recently has gotten more attention. But back when I wrote that book in 2009, hadn't got that much attention. Just a little bit about me is I've been a patent lawyer specializing in software patents for over 25 years. So I'm a computer scientist by training. I studied computer science at MIT. I mean, I started programming computers when I was a kid, about 10 years old. I was programming a TRS-80 at school in BASIC, as in there, around 1980 or so. And I always loved it. That's what took me eventually to MIT. I ended up going into law instead of going into software development as a career, but I've stuck with software by focusing on helping companies obtain patent protection for their software. So I've always been immersed in the software world. And with respect to the book, very early on, it's actually early 2000s, I started getting really interested in the ways in which computers were being used to automate the inventive process. It was very early days, uh, but it was happening even back then. And I wrote a bunch of academic papers. It culminated in this book, which, as you said, was called The Genie in the Machine. Talked about how various technologies like neural networks and evolutionary algorithms back at the time were being used to automate inventing and either to completely automatically generate inventions or at least to assist in the inventive process. And I gave a bunch of examples in that book of inventions, including some inventions that were designed completely automatically and then patented. Uh, so that there were examples even back then of computers creating inventions that were significant enough to be patentable. But you know, at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of interest in this topic because, we were definitely in a bit of an AI winter back then. I actually avoided using the term AI throughout most of the book because there was such a negative connotation to the term. And people, when they heard the term AI back then in the 2000s, thought, "Oh, the AI world had made so many promises that it failed on and couldn't fulfill that I use terms just like automation and
Mhm.
automated inventing. And I referred to the specific technologies like neural networks and evolutionary algorithms just because AI was so out of favor. I mean, fast forward to now, of course, AI is so hot that even companies that don't really use AI are using it. So it just shows you how the pendulum can swing. But we certainly are in a world now that I talked about back then. And let me just say, then I'll stop. But the reason I called the book "The Genie and the Machine" was that the metaphor I used throughout the book was that I talked about computers as machines that where a human could provide the computer with a wish, a description of what you as a human wanted to create, and then the machine would process that wish and grant your wish by producing a design, for a circuit or for software or for an airplane wing. I described all kinds of examples that would satisfy the requirements that you described in the wish. So I use that metaphor of wish and the computer as a genie that would grant the wish. And so I'm not surprised that right now it's generative language models and applications like ChatGPT that are catching everyone's attention and capturing everyone's imagination. They work very much, they feel very much like a genie. right? Where you put in a question and get an answer out, or you provide an instruction and ChatGPT follows that instruction. Uh, Using natural language on the input and the output,
Yeah.
much like a genie. And so I'm sure you'll have questions about it, but I chose that metaphor back then for a reason. And it's very satisfying and exciting to see the technology develop in such a way that it's become so much more powerful, practical, and widespread now in a lot of the ways I talked about back then.
Well, that's really, exciting, I would say. And I imagine at that time, as you said, maybe people would say, is this something for real? Like it's kind of surreal, I would say. Now, the question I want to ask you, Robert, and, it's good that also you are on, as you said, the computer science by practice and on the law side. Um, I want to, have your opinion on a topic. People usually now, when they talk about AI, they talk about, oh, the AI gonna replace us. The AI will take our job, right? And I'm interested to, because you have this practice for such long time. Do you think as AI is really replacing like authors, artists, inventors? Like, do you think this is happening?
So I really focus very significantly on this in the book. There certainly is a risk that that can happen with certain types of jobs, but what I would say is any kind of new automating technology typically automates specific types of tasks. So if you're a person and your job solely consists of doing a type of task that's now automated or automatable at low cost, then certainly your job is at risk of being eliminated. But most jobs aren't like, and most people have a wide range of skills. So it's actually most of the time not true that that technology completely eliminates jobs, but it certainly does happen uh, for sure. Uh, More what I focused on in the book was given the fact that that is a risk, there's a flip side to it, which is there are many opportunities that are created by automation, which is opportunities for humans to learn how to leverage the technology to augment their own ability. So I think there's really two ways you can look at tools, and I'll use ChatGPT just because it's the current
Yeah.
application that's so prominent now that most people can relate to, which is you can see it as something that you can use to augment, let's say, your writing skill. ChatGPT is great at generating text. So could it replace you as a writer? I suppose, but it could also make you a more effective, efficient, prolific writer if you learn how to use it. The second way you can look at it as an augmenting or skill boosting or speed efficiency boosting tool for humans to use if they learn how to leverage it. The other thing you can see it as is as a team member, essentially. You look at yourself in combination with Chat GPT, for example, as a team or a system, a
Hmm.
human computer system, which, and then the question is, how do you make the best use of those two or more team members to produce the best end result? And that's something which in business, of course, that's, you could say, what most of management theory and practice are about. How do you take humans and resources, including technology, and coordinate all of them to produce the highest quality output most efficiently? And that's another way we can see this instead of just solely looking at the replacement. I think obviously technology that automates generate tends to create this fear of replacement. I say let's take that seriously, but look at all sides of it, including the ways in which human and computer systems can become more effective and efficient.
Um, like Robert, I think this is a very valid, you know, and I am on this side because I know like people usually are divided between the ones who tries to make everything looks dark and the people who like yourself. I claim that I am on your side also as well because I see it as a tool, as you said, right? And a tool. is nothing without the human factor, right? And this is why this will bring me to the next question. Now, what I'm telling people, instead of you fearing from ChatGPT or any generative AI or any technology, it doesn't have to be only AI, because I always remind them, and some other guests they mentioned on previous episodes, like think about, there was someone who used to deliver the mails, the postman, and like we don't have need for that now, and this is because of technology. So I always tell people you need to upskill yourself. So what do you think are the skills that people would need to learn in order to get the most out of the latest AI, and also not AI? I can generalize this to any new tech, and just to think how I can avoid being replaced by AI or any other technology that brings automation.
I'd say one very common trend when any kind of new automation technology is introduced, uh, ChatGPT is a good example, is it tends to create an incentive for people to focus on higher level skills rather than on the lower level implementation details. So there's a lot of buzz right now with ChatGPT about what's called prompt engineering. I'm sure you know what that is. Maybe a lot of your listeners do. But what that means is how to write prompts or inputs to ChatGPT in order to get the best output. That's where a lot of the attention is going right now. Obviously, if I wanted ChatGPT, and I'll just use a simple example to find me a good place to go on vacation, I could say, where are good places for me to go on vacation? And it might provide an output, but you can see that prompt is very generic. The
Right.
more specific I make it to my desires and preferences and goals, like I love going to warm weather climates in the winter, etc., and then ask where to go, it'll provide a better output for me. So that's a very simplistic example, but people are learning a lot right now through a lot of experimentation and knowledge of how language models work about how to generate prompts to ChatGPT that are way more effective than the generic prompts you might think of. That is a what you call an upskill, I'd say higher level skill that there's a lot you could benefit a lot from focusing your effort right now on that. It's somewhat analogous to the trajectory that many people go through in their careers, particularly in professional careers. Let's say as a lawyer, you start out by doing things like writing legal memos. And then as
Mhm.
you get more senior, you start supervising other junior lawyers in writing memos. So what do you have to do? Learn how to give them good instructions for writing memos. You're not doing the detailed writing anymore. You're supervising or managing someone. You need to know how to review their work, which is also something you need to do with ChatGPT, not just take its output at face value, right? But verify it, perhaps then give a follow-up command. It's very analogous to becoming a more senior manager over the course of a career in the non-tech world. So that kind of higher level management supervisory set of skills is something that there's a lot to be benefited from. It's not something that a lot of tech people I think necessarily find easy, and it doesn't seem traditionally like a tech skill, but it is becoming a tech skill. I think it's very interesting in that, you know, uh, we're going to see, and we're already seeing people with backgrounds in things like writing or, literature, perhaps, having something really to contribute to doing things like commanding a language model or writing prompts. We're seeing very interesting shifts
Yeah.
between disciplines right now as a result of language models becoming so prominent.
On this point, I think, yeah, like it's very valid, because one of the things when I first tried ChatGPT, I was doing similar to what the rest of the world, was doing, is just try to ask questions, be generic. And with time, I started to understand a little bit more. Like I have like a little bit technical background, but of course, it was the first time I'm interacting with a large model. And then I figured out that the more details you give, the better answer you get. And actually, funny enough, one of the things that I tried to do, I tried to let ChatGPT, and I'm using the 4 version. I have the 4. I said, "Can you help me in understanding what is the best way to get better answers from you?" And actually, I was doing this in a different context, and it went there. And then actually, ChatGPT gave me the answer. He said, like, you need to give me a context. You need to give me this, that. And actually, I said, like, it was for fun only. I said, okay, let's write an ebook about this and give, for example, 50 examples or 100 examples of the best prompts. So 100% I agree. People would need to understand how to operate this technology, similar to how we learn to use computers, how we learn to use the internet, and then we took it from there. So yeah, I agree with you, Robert, on this point. Now, from because you work with a lot of tech companies, even from the legal side, I would say, how are you seeing the AI being used by tech companies to develop new products and services?
Most of what I'm seeing right now is not involving the use of language models. I am seeing some of that for sure. But I would say language models are getting the most attention on the consumer facing side. I think we will be seeing some more, let's say, tech products that involve the use of language models that are under development. But I'm seeing all kinds of uses of machine learning right now to learn how to study large amounts of data in order to find patterns, to gain insights, and to improve how technology works. Obviously, I'm a lawyer. There's a lot I do that's confidential, but what I'll say generically is a few fields where that's very prominent right now would
Mhm,
be robotics, uh, which traditionally attempts to program in rules for robots about how to interact with their environment, for example, have not fared very well. But machine learning, uh, the analogy is much like a child, or we as humans learn how to interact with our environments through moving around and experimenting and succeeding and failing. Machine learning is, very, very widely used in robotics, and that's showing significant gains. Another field would be network security. A great example, right? How much
mhm.
spam do you get? Or just think about attacks on networks. They come through so quickly in such large numbers and they evolve so rapidly. Computers through machine learning do a much better job of studying those patterns of attack and being able to identify them and evolve over time in response to new forms of network attacks. That network security makes very widespread use of AI and machine learning. So I'm seeing a lot. Again, generally, we know machine learning is used when you need to identify patterns and find those patterns then in new situations. So that's very widespread. I'll say, even though I can't provide the details, I am
Yeah, sure.
seeing people starting to include the use of language models internally in some of those types of products in, I'll just say, surprising or unexpected ways.
Okay. And like you mentioned about, being a lawyer and, the legal aspects of the things. I've seen a lot of debates and, even I've seen some companies who want to sue some of these AI companies because of like infringement of their IP. Now, the question is your take on this, like these, models that generate not only content, they generate actually arts, if you want, they generate this. And can really, can we make a patent for the content that an AI model might come up with? Like, I know like it's a double question, but actually it's in the same framework. Like from a legal perspective, how do you see it knowing that you have this expertise, Robert?
Yeah. So, I do focus primarily on patents. I think your question does raise some really interesting and tricky issues relating to copyright and trademark. So I won't give a really thorough answer on that because that's not my area of expertise. But I'll say that I know there's a lot of discussion going on right now between, and this has all been made public, between companies like OpenAI and major sources of content. I know I've read recently about Reddit, for example, and I think GPT 3 and 4 use Reddit as one of the
Yes.
sources of training data, and so I think there probably are some really good arguments that the process of training and the process of using any of the trained data in the output, if that trained data was copyrighted, that some of that could constitute copyright infringement. So I suspect this is a prediction, but I suspect the way this is going to be resolved is through licensing deals, agreements being made between companies like OpenAI and the sources of data they use, like Reddit, to avoid big, costly lawsuits. I think back to when, what was this, 20 plus years ago, when when Napster was founded, and there was a lot of controversy about music file sharing and copyright. And the legal issue, although there were major copyright infringement lawsuits in the industry at that time, the way the issue largely ended up getting resolved was by companies like Apple striking big licensing deals with the major music copyright owners, rather than by hashing it all out through litigation. So I suspect, and I also just hope that that's how it ends up working with AI, that there's some sort of agreement or set of agreements made that allows the AI training to continue on large volumes of data so that we all can get the benefit of that. And so that the copyright owners can be treated fairly and compensated for the work. Because it is true that uh, the quality of the output of something like ChatGPT does rely on tons of content that was created by humans. And as someone whose business is about protecting intellectual property, I think that people who created the content, need to be respected. Their legal rights need to be respected.
Mhm.
And I hope that there is some sort of industry wide solution to all of this.
Yeah, and I think I've read it somewhere that with GPT-4, they can ask where the content is from, so they can do the references for these content. So, uh, fair point. And but again, I think it's gonna take some time until because even that music deal that you mentioned that Apple did, it took quite some time from Steve Jobs at that time personally until he was able to convince, that it's a win-win for everyone. And I think it's a win-win even for these companies, because at the end of the day, people gonna still use their platforms. They're gonna use the AI, and everyone is a winner. Now, a question, like it's really, valid. I would say someone might think, okay, and this is applies to you and me, by the way, Robert. So, why should someone still hire us when they can get their answers, in just a click?
It's a great question. I think that is a question that all professionals, certainly, but really everyone needs to ask themselves and really push themselves on. I mean, I ask, what is the true, irreplaceable, non substitutable value that I and my firm provide to our clients? We really need to push ourselves to ask that. It's easy to become complacent and convince yourself that you're not replaceable in certain ways. And then I think when something like ChatGPT comes along, although it can't replace many people, including me, I think it's a wake up call. It's a wake up call to really have to push yourself hard, ask that question, and come up with a really clear answer. One way to think about it, I think, is again, I think you and your listeners will be familiar with this sort of continuum in the IT world, which is the continuum from what's often called data to information to
Yeah.
knowledge, right? And so data is raw pieces of data. In a business, it might be revenue numbers. Uh, that's just raw data. Information is when you start attaching some meaning to it. And I'll say that, right, many, many years ago, law firms and accounting firms and other professional firms, stock brokers, were able to generate a lot of revenue just because of their monopoly on data. I'll say stock is a good example. Think back before computerized stock markets and websites that had stock information. Clients of stockbrokers paid stockbrokers just to get data because it
Right.
wasn't otherwise available. Now, I want to say no one does that. I mean, that might
Yeah.
be never say never, right? But because the data about the stock markets and even information, meaning information is the next layer, meaning attached to it, like trends, you can pull up on your phone, right, in the built-in app, what the trend has been in the Dow or the Nasdaq over the years. That's information now. You can get all of that for free instantly anywhere. So it's hard or impossible then for professionals to charge for information. But my general point is, as you go up, as each layer becomes either automated or available for free or easily, professionals and firms tend to start moving to the next layer to find their value. And we said, most people were saying in the 90s and 2000s that again, law firms and professional firms were going to need to start finding value in knowledge, which goes beyond just mere information. Why? Because information about the law was readily and easily available on the web. So what's knowledge? It's usually called something like the knowledge of how information applies in certain circumstances and how different pieces of information relate to each other. So you could say, oh, just because someone, a consumer, has access to certain legal statutes or court decisions, they might not have the knowledge of how to apply that to their own situation. And that's why they need to turn to a lawyer. Going back to your question, lawyers would say, well, that's why people will still hire me rather than just go on the web. Now, when I think something like ChatGPT starts to move us in the direction of um, is even making certain types of knowledge available. I mean, I've been amazed with certain types of questions how ChatGPT provides at least the appearance of being able to draw connections between different types of concepts. That's what you normally would call knowledge. I don't think it actually has an understanding, but who cares? If you're just looking for an answer and it's able to provide the functional equivalent of knowledge as a consumer, why would you not do that and pay someone like a lawyer? So what's the level above knowledge? You know, uh, I haven't seen too much about it, but sometimes it's called wisdom.
Hmm.
uh, I think that's where we're having to move to find our own value and in answer to the question of why should anyone still hire us? It has to be because we have wisdom, which is the ability to really take all of the circumstances into account. A client comes to me, they might already be able to gain general knowledge about things like patent strategy, which not too many years ago they wouldn't have had. But what can I provide? I can take all of my years of experience, talk to them, learn about their goals in great detail, and guide them interactively, not just in one meeting, but over time through the development and execution of intellectual property strategy that's tailored to their goals, their needs, their preferences, their personality, which is very important. That is what I'd say is wisdom. But you can see how the technology is really pushing all professional. I say professional, it's not really professional. It's anyone who earns a living from people coming to them for information and information based services, pushing us to, as you said, upskill ourselves up to that next level in order to remain relevant and valuable.
And again, just with my 2 cents, as I can say on this one, I'm telling a lot of people now, like, like, really you need to change the game, because if you keep doing the same thing that you were doing before this technology, I believe, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm telling them, but you are already obsolete. So you need to think about, as you said, how we can go to the next level, how I can add value. And as you mentioned, at the end of the day, ChatGPT is leveraging already existing knowledge and getting it out to us in a logical way that it might take us long time to get it. So we need to really upskill here, because part of the reasoning, and I'm seeing now attempts actually to make this reasoning more deep. And by the way, just for the audience, guys, this is not a new concept. You need to understand that this technology have been there since long time. Remember the computer that have won over the chess champion at that time. And this is because they were able to, train it in a way to go deep, think like I not 2 steps, 5 steps. It can do the whole simulation, how the game will end up and what is the best move to win. So ChatGPT and this technologies, they rely on something similar. If I want to make it simple, this is what a language model, large language model is not the knowledge itself, it's the algorithm that push to go deep and get the knowledge and then stick it together in that way. And this is you need to think of course, how I can be above this. I think this is what you're referring to, Robert. Now, but this is what we hear from people. We don't trust. You know, we need to see how it will be. Widespread adopted by others. Some safety concerns. So, how do you think, or how consumers can really get over these things, and what is the safety of AI and acceptance of it by the consumer?
So these are all valid concerns, things like safety and accuracy of the output of ChatGPT. But I think what I hear in your statement is that you, like I, have heard from people who take this attitude or this logic. I've tried using ChatGPT. It doesn't always give completely accurate answers. Therefore, I will not use it at all. Therefore, I don't have to worry about it replacing me in any way or reducing my value. I think the therefore is not justified. I mean, look at the automobile. The
Yeah,
automobile is a very dangerous piece of equipment. Many, many people are killed every year as a result of using automobiles. It hasn't stopped us and countries around the world from using it for the last 100 years. Uh, what companies do when they create and market products is do a cost benefit analysis. And what consumers, which are sometimes companies and sometimes individuals, do when they adopt new technologies is also a cost benefit analysis. Uh, and if if the benefits outweigh the costs, for the most part, people end up adopting technologies and then they deal with the risks. What so one, if you think you are not at risk from being competed against by this new technology, you're making a real mistake. If you think you're not going to be competed against just because it makes errors, you're deluding yourself. The other thing is people in that adopting that type of logic, they don't seem to be comparing the technology to the status quo. When I've spoken to some people say I won't use it um, for answering certain types of questions because it makes mistakes. I say, well, do you hire people to do things for you? And if so, are they 100% accurate all of the time in the work product that they produce for you? If the answer is no, then how do you deal with that? How do you incorporate that error prone, not reliable work into your overall processes? You have ways of dealing with it in
yeah,
order to get the benefit out of work that isn't 100% accurate and reliable and safe all the time. These are not new problems to deal with in business, whether it comes to output that's text or anything else, machinery in manufacturing that's not completely safe. We put safeguards in place. And so here's one, I'll say a simple thing that I tell people if they're fearful of using Chat GPT to do things like write, which is use it to write or generate snippets of text on topics that you already know very well, that you're already expert in, even, so that you can quickly and easily on your own do your own accuracy verification of the output. And then someone might say, well, why would I do that then? Couldn't I just write it on my own? And the answer is to increase the speed. I mean, I've used ChatGPT a lot of times to do what I call writing something that I could have written, but doing it more quickly. There's so many things that I have to write, which are rehashing things that I've written in some way or shape or form before, but I'm writing it again, maybe slightly differently from a different angle with some different background information. And I know if I sat down for, excuse me, a half an hour, I could write that text again. I can't just quit. I can't just copy and paste something I've written before exactly, but I need something that's somewhat like that. And I found that often using either ChatGPT or some other type of language model based tool lets me generate that text in 10 minutes rather than 30 minutes. That may not seem groundbreaking, but that is a 67% increase in efficiency. So there's a lot of sort of low hanging fruit that's not very sexy that you can gain. And I think, again, the people who say, well, I'm just not going to use it, or who think no one else is going to use it because it has accuracy or safety problems, they're doing two things. They're deluding themselves about whether other people are going to use it, and they're missing out on getting the benefit of using this kind of tool themselves.
Robert, like maybe I'm repeating something I mentioned on a previous episode. When this article came about, the previous head of AI at Google leaving and warning people that, yeah, I'm afraid that it will go into the hands of wrong people. And what I mentioned, and because you gave the example of an automobile, the example I gave, it was much simpler. I said, guys, in history, like if you think about the first time fire was i- invented, it's a dangerous tool if it falls in the hands of a bad guy. If you think about, I don't know, like I counted a lot of things since Stone Age till our age, and each time we can claim the same thing, that yeah, this technology, if it falls in the hands of wrong people, it will hurt us, right? And this is why I said we should be more keen to use actually these tools to figure out how we can fight back the bad guys. So this is pretty much, I enjoyed you talking about it. And the second thing, if you allow me, I want to add about repetition. And again, what I mentioned in that episode, I said I would prefer an AI tool that, even if it's gonna take part of my day-to-day task, rather than a boss, just because of he want to have fun with his staff, he let them do some repetitive tasks, right? So I prefer an AI to hire me, or to interview me, rather than, being under the mercy of someone who I don't know, right? So, of course, as you said, every technology comes with its benefits and sometimes disadvantages, and you need to do, this equilibrium. And this is would lead me to the final question, because we mentioned about, like the safety, and a lot of talks have been recently about, you know, how can biases in AI be overcome to promote equity, inclusion, fairness, accuracy? What do you think can be done on that part?
I know that's really important concern. In fact, where the main reason that language models often have biased, bigoted, offensive output is that they're trained on human output. So we have to blame ourselves, right? I mean, the internet can be a really a place that's full of lots of offensive, shocking content. I know that OpenAI, when it was testing out early versions of ChatGPT, they found this very, very quickly. And one of the things they did is a partial answer to your question, which is they built in safeguards. You could think of them as filters, um, because the language model itself, for the most part, can't really be tweaked. It's learned. It's not programmed. Excuse me. Most of the work, I believe, to put in these safeguards has to be done on the back end, on the output end. I could be wrong about that. Maybe people are developing new ways now to build the safeguards more directly into the model. You certainly can also influence this by the training data that you use. Perhaps I don't know if anyone is trying to build sort of safer, more DEI friendly type models just by being more selective about which data they use to train. You could certainly imagine that if your goal is to create an application that helps people do things like marketing writing, it doesn't need to be trained on the whole internet necessarily. I mean, you might still benefit from training it on a really large corpus of data, but you could be a lot more selective about the data set that you use to train. In fact, I saw recently that it was Bloomberg, right, had trained this. They claim was the largest ever financial language model based just on financial data. And you can imagine you'd kill two birds with one stone on that, right? You create a domain specific language model that's more tailored to finance. And I would assume, excuse me, you would also potentially, as a side effect, address the offensive content problem because you're training on data that's not from Reddit or other places maybe where people are writing a lot of offensive stuff. I do know there's a lot going on now with people developing, whether it's domain specific or problem specific language models. That's another way to go about it. The other thing that I know is going on now is a lot of organizations. I shouldn't say a lot. Certainly, some large companies are working on developing their own internal language models. You have something like Microsoft Copilot coming down the
Yeah.
pike, right? Which is going to that is very exciting to me. Which is going to let companies, uh, you know, ask questions about and generate content based on their own company's internal content.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, that again might serve that double duty of being generating output that's more tailored to the company and not having all the offensive stuff built into it. So I think those are probably the two answers to the question of what is a really legitimate concern.
Again, and to your point, Robert, the data is not something that AI created or invented. It is what us humans have generated this. And sometimes when they say, "Yeah, but it's a biased data, it's biased information," I said, "Well, I cannot blame the AI itself because remember, the AI it's not something that has it doesn't have it's not a conscious, right? So it's just a program. It's just a software. And like as they used to teach us in computer science 101, a software is like a black box. It has input and then it has an output. And then whenever you have to feed, this is what you will get. So better we clean up, what we have been doing on the internet, maybe I don't know for now 30, 35 years or more. And then we can blame the AI of being biased. So pretty much, I believe it's true, and the efforts, as you mentioned, where actually they are giving us, I mean, the ability to train the model. So I know for a fact, I don't know how to do it, of course, but I know matter of fact that OpenAI, for example, they allow you, of course, if you have the subscription, to use your own data to train the model, and then you'd be not relying on their model. And actually, they have not invented that model. They leverage the internet, whatever content that has been created for all these years to just come up with. So, yeah, I believe it's a very valid point, Robert. Anything you want to add or to mention before we close?
Yeah, I'll just say, it's something we've talked about already, but we focused a lot on the technical and business aspects. But I just want to emphasize the fact that there's a lot of emotion attached to all of this that we in the tech world often don't talk about. And fear is the one we have touched on somewhat, namely that fear of being replaced or being made obsolete by technology. I think it raises for many people. I felt it, a fear, a question of what is my value as a human being, right? What is my value going to be? Um, I spoke to someone recently, a client of mine who's in the education world, who's saying, I guess, in education, just like in biology, where people have kept asking what makes humans unique. And for a while, it was tool use. And now we found that there's other species that use tools. So we're not unique in that way. Of course, it used to be that we thought we were literally at the center of the universe, the physical universe. Well, that's not true. And then we thought it was language. Well, now we're starting to see that it's not language. This client of mine was saying in education, sometimes people say it's what's called transference, the ability of humans to take concepts from one context and apply them to another. I've asked ChatGPT, I said, take this concept, this theory, and apply it, write me an essay about it in this other field. And it's done quite a good job. Again,
It would do.
functionally appearing to sort of understand the underlying concepts in a way that seems surprising to me from a language model that's really just a text prediction model. So, I would say to all of us, be aware of these feelings and fears that the technology triggers in you, including your own belief about what makes you unique, what makes you valuable, and try to not be so reactive to the fears. I mean, I'm glad we've had this conversation about we're able to step back from the fear and just really look at the pros and cons of the technology more
Right.
objectively and acknowledge the fear, acknowledge the legitimate bases behind these fears, but not just react to them and have a knee jerk reaction that causes you to just reject the technology, let's say out of hand, or make rash judgments about it. That's, I think, what I would end with because, emotion is not something we talk about a lot, but this is one area of technology that really triggers a lot of strong feelings in people.
That's 100% something I agree with. And just for fun, for sake of fun, um, about combining concepts. And by the way, this prompt was not by me. The prompt was generated by ChatGPT because I asked it to create prompts that does something similar. And the prompt goes like this: invent a creative approach to cooking or baking that encourages experimentation and playfulness. And you have to see the answer. It, it came up, it came up with such a nice answer. And I said, wow, where are we heading? But again, um, I would, I am on the optimistic side of things always. And like any new technology we're gonna hear, especially, and excuse me, mainstream media, I talk a lot about you, yeah, because this is the way you live. You make these headlines that scares people. Sorry, um, but I'm not buying them. So uh, like we need to keep experimenting, and I think things will get better with time. And thanks, for people like yourself, Robert, who also not only from the technical aspects can talk and articulate it from the legal aspects as well, from business aspects. And I am sure with all, these efforts from professionals like yourself, like we gotta reach a place where really this is my own belief, and I repeated on the show multiple times. I believe not only AI automation, there's a lot of other technologies coming there. It's taking us to a point where really we would be in more, I would say, prosperous situation. We will not have to do, I would say, dummy jobs. I would say something that doesn't require us to think too much. And if we start to use our brains more, we're gonna reach like even more better places. So I'm hoping one day, like AI would be able to solve really the world problem. We are not there yet, but hoping to reach that phase. And with that, I would like again to thank you, Robert, for coming to the show today. You took the time. I really appreciate it. And for the people who are watching us or you are listening this using your favorite podcasting platform, thank you very much for listening. If you have any feedback about this episode or about the show in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can reach out to me by email or on the social media. Mainly, you find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. And don't forget also to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show. We are trying to bring, the best content and to bring, the hot topics and discuss them in the very informative way, I would say. And again, I'm repeating that if you are interested to be on the show, as a guest. Again, don't hesitate to approach me. I would be more than happy to discuss this with you. And until we meet in the next episode, thank you very much for your time and see you soon.